The November rain hammered against the windows of the penthouse apartment like accusations. Alessandro Benedetti stood in the darkness, looking down at the city that had once belonged to him, watching the lights blur through the water streaming down the glass. 24 hours ago, he'd been untouchable, the head of the Benedetti crime family, controller of the New Jersey ports, owner of legitimate businesses worth hundreds of millions. Men had bowed. When he entered a room, politicians had returned his calls. Police commissioners had looked the other way. 24 hours ago, he'd had power. Now he had nothing. The FBI raid had been perfectly coordinated. They'd hit all his properties simultaneously. His restaurant in Hoboken, his social club in Newark, his construction company offices, his shipping warehouses. They'd seized everything. Bank accounts frozen, assets confiscated. Even this penthouse, technically owned by a shell corporation, would be gone by the end of the week. But the real betrayal hadn't come from the FBI. It had come from his own brother. Matteo Benedetti had been wearing a wire for 18 months. His own blood, his little brother, who Alessandro had protected their entire lives, who he'd brought into the business, who he'd trusted with everything. Matteo had given the FBI recordings, documents, testimony, enough to build a RICO case that would put Alessandro away for life. And in exchange, Matteo got immunity, witness protection, and freedom from a life he'd apparently been desperate to escape. The family had fallen apart within hours. The capos who'd sworn loyalty had scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Some fled the country, others turned themselves in, hoping for deals. The soldiers, the men who'd been paid by Alessandro for years, had simply disappeared. No one wanted to be associated with a sinking ship. Alessandro's lawyer had called an hour ago with the final piece of bad news. "They're coming for you tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., federal marshals. I've negotiated that you can surrender rather than be dragged out in handcuffs, but that's the best I could do. The charges are extensive with the evidence they have. You're looking at life without parole." Life without parole. Alessandro was 47 years old. He'd spent 25 years building an empire, becoming someone who mattered, creating power from nothing. And now it would all end in a federal prison cell where he'd die old and forgotten. The irony wasn't lost on him. His father, Giovanni Benedetti, had always said that in their world there were only two ways out: prison or death. Alessandro had always assumed he'd choose death when the time came, go out fighting like a man rather than rot. In a cage, the gun sat on the desk behind him, loaded, ready. One bullet was all it would take to deny them their victory, to go out on his own terms. But something held him back, not fear. Alessandro hadn't been afraid of death since he was 16 years old and had pulled his first trigger, not regret exactly. He'd made his choices with open eyes. No, what held him back was anger, the burning, consuming rage at being betrayed by the person he'd loved. Most in this world, how could Matteo have done this? How could his own brother have looked him in the eye day after day while wearing a wire, recording conversations, documenting crimes, building the case that would destroy everything? Alessandro poured himself another glass of scotch from the bottle of Macallan 30-year that would probably be seized tomorrow. $1,400 a bottle. He'd drunk half of it tonight, trying to dull the pain. But it wasn't working. Nothing was working. The penthouse was silent except for the rain and Alessandro's own ragged breathing. Usually there were people here, associates stopping by with updates, women he kept company with, staff maintaining the property. But tonight everyone had abandoned him. Even his driver, loyal for 15 years, had disappeared without a word. That's when he heard the key turning in the lock. Alessandro's hand moved instinctively to the gun, years of survival instincts taking over. But when the door opened, it wasn't federal agents or rival family soldiers. It was the cleaning woman. She was black, maybe 35 years old, wearing a gray uniform and carrying a bucket of cleaning supplies. She froze when she saw him, clearly not expecting anyone to be here. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice carrying a thick Haitian accent. "I didn't know anyone was home. The service, they tell me to clean the penthouse tonight. I can come back." "No," Alessandro said, his voice rough from the scotch and the anger. "Stay, do your job. I won't be here much longer anyway." The woman hesitated, clearly sensing something wrong in the atmosphere, but she needed the job more than she needed safety. Alessandro could see that in the way she finally nodded and came inside. She moved through the penthouse quietly, efficiently, cleaning. With the invisible presence of someone who'd learned to not be noticed by the wealthy people she served, Alessandro watched her for a while, fascinated by her calm competence. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to make conversation, didn't react to the half-empty bottle of expensive scotch or the gun on the desk or the man clearly in crisis standing in the darkness. She just did her work. There was something almost meditative about watching her. The way she moved from room to room, restoring order, making things clean as if order was possible, as if things could be clean again. Alessandro was on his third hour of watching her work, his fourth glass of scotch, when she finally spoke. "You should eat something," she said, not looking at him. She was cleaning the kitchen now, wiping down counters that were already immaculate. "Drinking on an empty stomach. It's not good." "I'm not hungry." "Maybe not. But your body needs food anyway. When was the last time you ate?" Alessandro tried to remember. "Yesterday, the day before." Time had become fluid in the last 24 hours. "I don't remember," he admitted. The woman opened his refrigerator, which was stocked with expensive ingredients that a private chef came in 3 times a week to prepare. She pulled out eggs, butter, bread, cheese. "I make you something simple," she said. It wasn't a question. Alessandro should have told her to leave him alone, should have reminded her that she was the help, not his mother, but he was so tired, so bone-deep exhausted from the weight of betrayal and loss. "Fine," he said. She made him a simple omelette with cheese and herbs, toast with butter. Peasant food, really. Nothing like the elaborate meals his chef prepared, but when she placed it in front of him at the kitchen island, the smell made his stomach clench. With sudden hunger, he ate in silence while she continued cleaning. The omelette was perfect, simple but perfect. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, surprised that he'd spoken to her directly. Marie Toussaint. "How long have you worked for the cleaning service, Marie?" 3 years. Before that, I clean houses private, but the service, they pay more regular. It's more stable for my family." "You have family?" 3 children. 2 boys and a girl. My husband, he died 5 years ago, construction accident in Manhattan. So now I work. I take care of my children. I try to give them better life than I had." Alessandro heard his own story echoed in hers, trying to give family a better life, working hard, making sacrifices. The difference was that Marie was doing it legally, honestly, while Alessandro had chosen a different path. "I'm sorry about your husband," he said. "Thank you. God's will we don't always understand, but we accept." "Do you accept?" Marie stopped cleaning and looked at him directly. "What choice do I have? I can be angry at God, angry at the world, angry at the construction company that didn't have proper safety, but anger doesn't feed my children. Anger doesn't pay rent, so I accept, I keep moving, I do what I must do." That's very practical. That's survival. When you have no choice, you become practical. Very fast. Alessandro drank more scotch, feeling the edges of the world soften. What if you do have choices? What if you had power and money and everything you thought mattered, and then it all got taken away? Marie resumed her cleaning. "Then you find out what you're really made of. Money and power, they're easy. Anyone can be strong when they have those things, but being strong when you have nothing, that takes real courage. I'm going to prison." "Tomorrow," Alessandro said suddenly. He didn't know why he was telling her this. Maybe because she was a stranger who would be gone in an hour and he'd never see her again. Maybe because he needed to say it out loud to someone who wouldn't judge him or pity him or pretend it wasn't happening. Marie stopped cleaning again. "I see. That's all you're going to say?" "I see? What do you want me to say? I'm sorry? I don't know you. I don't know what you did to deserve prison. Maybe you did terrible things. Maybe you hurt people. If that's true, then prison is justice." Her honesty was like a slap. Alessandro had been surrounded by yes-men and sycophants for so long that her blunt assessment was shocking. "I did hurt people," he admitted. "I built an empire on pain and fear. I told myself it was business, that it was just the way things were. But you're right, I hurt people, and now I'm paying for it." "So you accept responsibility. That's good. That's the first step." "The first step to what? Redemption? There's no redemption for someone like me." Marie came over and sat down across from him at the kitchen island. It was a presumptuous thing for a cleaning woman to do, but somehow Alessandro didn't mind. "You want to know what I think?" she asked. "Apparently you're going to tell me anyway. I think everyone can be redeemed, everyone, I don't care. What you did, what you built, who you hurt. If you're truly sorry, if you truly want to change, redemption is always possible. Maybe not in this life, maybe not in the eyes of the people you hurt, but in God's eyes, always." "I don't believe in God." "Doesn't matter, God believes in you." Alessandro laughed, but it came out bitter. "If God believed in me, he wouldn't have let my own brother betray me, wouldn't have let everything I built turn to ashes. Or maybe God is giving you a chance to build something better, something real, something that can't be taken away by the FBI or by betrayal." "Like what?" "Like peace, like forgiveness, like knowing who you really are when all the power and money is stripped away." Alessandro stared at this cleaning woman with her simple faith and her direct words. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know my world." "No, but I know suffering. I know loss. I know what it's like to have everything taken from you, and I know that the only way to survive is to find something that can't be taken, something inside you." Hey, if you're connecting with Alessandro and Marie's story, could you hit that like button? It helps stories like this reach the people who need them and stay with us, because what happens in this one night will change everything. Marie stood up and resumed her cleaning. "You have choice tonight. You can feel sorry for yourself, drink until you pass out, maybe use that gun I saw on your desk, or you can use this last night of freedom to figure out who you want to be when you come out of prison, because you will come out, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20. But if you come out the same man who went in, then you wasted all that time, you wasted your life. And how do I figure out who I want to be? By praying, by finding Jesus, by being honest with yourself, with God if you believe, with the people you hurt, by accepting what you did and choosing to be better. She gathered her cleaning supplies. I'm done here. The penthouse is clean. I hope you find what you're looking for tonight. She headed for the door, and Alessandro found himself calling out, "Wait." Marie turned. "Why did you stay? When you realized I was here, when you saw I was clearly in crisis, why didn't you just leave? Call your service and tell them you'd come back another time. Because I needed the money. 3 children don't feed themselves, and because," she paused, "because I saw the gun on your desk, and I've known men who chose the gun before. My cousin, my brother, my husband's friend. I thought maybe if someone just talked to you, just treated you like a human being instead of whatever you are to everyone else, maybe you'd choose something different. You stayed to save me. I stayed to clean the penthouse. What you do with the time I was here, that's up to you." After she left, Alessandro sat in the silent penthouse for a long time. The scotch bottle was empty now. The gun still sat on the desk, ready. Dawn was maybe 2 hours away, and then the federal marshals would come. He thought about what Marie had said, about redemption, about choosing who you want to be, about not wasting your life. Alessandro had built an empire. He'd been powerful, feared, respected, but what had it gotten him? A penthouse he'd barely lived in, money he'd barely spent, power that had evaporated the moment his brother betrayed him, and no one, not one person, had stayed when things fell apart, except a cleaning woman who needed the money and thought maybe she could talk a stranger out of killing himself. Alessandro made a decision. He put the gun in the safe, locked it, and threw the combination into the garbage disposal. He wouldn't be taking the easy way out. He spent the remaining hours before dawn writing letters to his mother, who died 5 years ago, thinking he was a legitimate businessman, to his brother, forgiving him for the betrayal because he understood now that Matteo had been trying to escape a life that was suffocating him, to the families of people he'd hurt. He didn't send these, just wrote them, acknowledging what he'd done, and to himself a letter from the man he was to the man he wanted to become. When the federal marshals knocked on his door at 7 a.m., Alessandro Benedetti answered wearing a suit, clean-shaven, sober. He surrendered with dignity, without resistance. "I'm ready," he told them. "Let's go." Prison was exactly as terrible as Alessandro had imagined. The noise, the violence, the degradation, the constant threat from inmates who knew who he was and wanted to make a name for themselves by taking down a former mob boss. The first 6 months were the hardest. Alessandro was attacked twice, hospitalized once. He learned to fight in a different way than he'd fought on the streets of Newark as a young man. This was about pure survival. No rules, no backup, but he survived, and slowly, impossibly, he started to change. He got his GED, which he'd never finished as a teenager. Then he took college courses through the prison education program, business administration of all things, learning to do legally what he'd done illegally for 25 years. He volunteered in the prison library, helping other inmates learn to read. He led an anger management group, sharing his own story of violence and its consequences. He wrote letters to victims' families, not expecting forgiveness, just offering acknowledgement and apology. The guards were shocked by his transformation. "Benedetti actually gives a shit about something other than power," one guard told another, not knowing Alessandro could hear. "Never thought I'd see the day." 3 years into his sentence, Alessandro got a letter. The return address was in Brooklyn and the handwriting was feminine and careful. He opened it cautiously. "Dear Mr. Benedetti, my name is Marie Toussaint. 3 years ago, I cleaned your penthouse the night before you went to prison. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. I've been thinking about you, praying for you, hoping you chose life instead of that gun I saw. I don't know if you'll get this letter. I don't know if you want to hear from a cleaning woman you met one time, but I wanted you to know that the conversation we had that night changed me too. It reminded me that everyone is fighting battles we can't see, that even powerful men can be broken, that showing up and doing your job might save someone's life. My daughter, she's in college now. First person in my family to go to college. She wants to be a lawyer, to help people who can't afford good legal help. She says she was inspired by my stories about working hard and never giving up, but really, she was inspired by you too, by the man who lost everything but chose to surrender with dignity instead of giving up. I don't know what your life is like in prison. I imagine it's very hard, but I hope you remember what I said that night about finding something inside you that can't be taken away, about choosing who you want to be. I'm praying for you. I'll keep praying for you, and maybe someday when you get out, you'll have the chance to build something real, something that matters. God bless you." Marie Toussaint Alessandro read the letter 5 times. Then he wrote, "Back, dear Marie, I remember you. I remember everything about that night. The omelette you made me, the way you cleaned my penthouse-like order was still possible. The things you said about redemption and choice. You saved my life that night. I had the gun loaded and ready. I was planning to use it. But you treated me like a human being instead of a mob boss or a coward or a failure. You just talked to me like I mattered. No one had done that in a very long time. Prison is hard. But I'm using the time, like you said, getting educated, helping other inmates, trying to figure out who I want to be when I get out. I still have 7 years left on my sentence, but I'm not wasting it anymore. Thank you for remembering me. Thank you for praying. Thank you for showing up that night and choosing to stay. You didn't know it, but you were an angel in a cleaning uniform with respect and gratitude. Alessandro Benedetti." They wrote back and forth for the next 7 years. Marie told him about her children, about her struggles to pay for her daughter's college, about her faith and her community. Alessandro told her about his progress, about the books he was reading, about the man he was becoming. Marie visited him once a year, just a simple visit, an hour of conversation in the prison visiting room. She'd bring him books, tell him stories, pray with him even, though he still wasn't sure he believed. "Why do you do this?" Alessandro asked during one visit. "Why do you care about what happens to me?" "Because that night in your penthouse I saw something in you. Beneath all the power and the anger and the ego, I saw someone who was just scared and alone. And nobody should have to be scared and alone, no matter what they did. I don't deserve your kindness. It's not about deserving. Grace isn't earned, it's given, that's the whole point." 10 years after he went to prison, Alessandro Benedetti was released on good behavior. He was 57 years old, had $53,000 saved from prison work programs, and absolutely no idea how to navigate the world as an ex-con. Marie was waiting outside the prison gates. She'd aged in the decade since he'd seen her. Gray streaked her hair now, and lines marked her face, but her smile was the same, warm and genuine. "Welcome back to the world," she said. Alessandro didn't know what to say. They'd written for 10 years, but standing in front of her as a free man was different. She'd been the only person who'd stayed constant through his entire incarceration, the only person who'd seen him as more than his crimes. "I didn't expect you to be here," he said finally. "Where else would I be? You're starting a new life today. That's worth celebrating." She drove him to Brooklyn, to a small apartment she'd helped him find and furnish. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, old furniture in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but it was clean and safe and his. "The landlord knows your situation," Marie explained. "He's a good man from my church. He believes in second chances. You'll pay rent like everyone else, but he won't judge you for your past. How can I ever repay you for this, for everything? By being the man you wrote about in your letters, by using your freedom well, by helping someone else the way I helped you." Alessandro started working at a community center in Brooklyn, helping at-risk youth avoid the mistakes he'd made. He spoke honestly about his past, about the violence and the power and the ultimate emptiness of it all. "I had everything," he'd tell the kids who thought gang life was glamorous. "Money, power, respect, fear. And you know what? It meant nothing. The moment I fell, everyone disappeared. No loyalty, no love, just people using each other. Is that really what you want?" Some kids listened, some didn't. But Alessandro kept showing up, kept telling his story, kept trying to save even one kid from the path he'd taken. He started a small business, consulting with legitimate companies about security and logistics. Turns out 25 years of running a criminal organization had given him skills that translated to legal business. He was good at systems, at organization, at seeing how all the pieces fit together. The money wasn't amazing, but it was honest, and that mattered more than Alessandro could have imagined. Marie remained his closest friend. They had dinner once a week. Every Sunday she'd cook Haitian food and tell him about her children. Her daughter was a public defender now. Her sons, both working in construction, carrying on their father's trade, but with better safety regulations. "I'm proud of you," she told Alessandro one Sunday, 5 years after his release. "You did what most men can't do. You changed, really changed. I had help. I had someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's all any of us need. One person who sees our potential." Alessandro had been thinking about something for months. Now seemed like the right time. "Marie, I need to tell you something." "Okay. That night in the penthouse when you made me that omelet and talked to me about redemption, you saved my life, but you did more than that. You gave me a reason to want to live. You were the first person in years who treated me like a human being instead of an asset or a threat or a disappointment." "Alessandro, let me finish. These past 15 years, the letters, the visits, the help with the apartment, the dinners, you've been my family. The only real family I've had since my mother died, and I'm grateful. But I'm also, he struggled to find the words, I'm also in love with you, and I have been for a long time, and I needed to tell you before I lost my courage. Marie was quiet for a long moment. Alessandro's heart pounded. He'd prepared himself for rejection. After all, what did he have to offer her? He was an ex-con with a modest income and a terrible past. She deserved so much better. You know what's funny? Marie said finally. I've been in love with you too since about year 3 of your incarceration, when I realized your letters were the highlight of my month, when I found myself thinking about you constantly, praying for you, wanting you to succeed. Then why didn't you say anything? Because you needed to focus on your rehabilitation. You needed to become the man you wanted to be without the complication of romance. And I needed to be sure you were changing for yourself, not for me. And now you've been out 5 years. You've built a good life, you help people, you've proven that the change was real, so now, she smiled, now I'm allowed to admit that I love you too. Alessandro crossed the small kitchen and took her hands. I'm 62 years old. I'm an ex-mob boss with a criminal record. I'll never be rich or powerful again. All I can offer you is honesty and loyalty, and the promise that I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of you. That's more than I've ever been offered before, Marie said. My first husband was a good man, but he never told me he loved me until the day he died. You've been telling me in your actions for 15 years. That's worth more than all the power and money you used to have. They were married 6 months later, in the same Brooklyn church, where Marie had prayed for him throughout his incarceration. It was a small ceremony. Her children and grandchildren, a few friends from the community center, Father Michael, who'd counseled Alessandro through his transition back to society. Alessandro was 63, Marie was 55. They were both too old for fairy tale endings, both too weathered by life to believe in perfection, but they believed in second chances, in redemption, in the power of one person showing up and choosing to see the humanity in someone everyone else had written off. 8 years after his release, 18 years after that night in the penthouse, Alessandro Benedetti stood in the community center he now ran, watching Marie teach a cooking class to teenage mothers who were trying to build lives for themselves and their children. She was explaining how to make a simple, nutritious meal on a tight budget. The same kind of meal she'd made him that night. Simple, honest, nourishing. One of the girls, maybe 17, was crying, I can't do this. I can't raise a baby alone. I'm going to fail. Marie put down her spoon and went to the girl, putting her arm around her. Listen to me, Marie said gently. You're not going to fail. You know how I know. Because you're here. Because you're trying. Because you showed up when you could have given up. That's not failure. That's courage. Alessandro watched his wife comfort this scared teenager, and he was transported back to that night 18 years ago when he'd been the one scared and alone, and Marie had shown up and refused to look away. That night, he'd lost everything. His power, his money, his empire, his freedom. Everything he'd spent 25 years building had collapsed in a single day, but losing everything had also been the beginning of finding what actually mattered. A woman who saw past his crimes to his humanity, a chance to rebuild himself from nothing, a purpose that had meaning beyond power and fear, a life that couldn't be seized by the FBI or betrayed by blood. Marie had told him that night that the only way to survive losing everything was to find something inside you that couldn't be taken away. He'd found it, not immediately, not easily, but through 10 years of prison, through the hard work of changing, through the patient love of a woman who refused to give up on him. He'd found something real. Peace, purpose, love, redemption. After the cooking class, Marie found Alessandro in his office, going over budgets for the center. Penny for your thoughts? She asked, sitting on the edge of his desk. I was thinking about that night, when you came to clean the penthouse and I was planning to kill myself. What made you stay? Really? You said you needed the money, but I think it was more than that. Marie was quiet for a moment, remembering. My husband, before he died, he'd been struggling. The construction work was drying up. We had bills. He felt like he was failing us. The night before the accident, he told me he wished he could just disappear, and I was so focused on my own stress that I didn't really hear him, didn't stop and just listen. She took Alessandro's hand. The next day, he had the accident, and I've always wondered if it really was an accident. If maybe he was so deep in despair that he wasn't being careful, that maybe if I'd just listened the night before, really listened, he'd still be alive. Marie, so when I walked into your penthouse and saw you in that same kind of despair, I knew I had a choice. I could leave like I'd left my husband, or I could stay, could listen, could try to pull you back from that edge. I couldn't save my husband, but maybe I could save you. Alessandro pulled her close. You did save me. You gave me a reason to choose life. And you know what the crazy thing is? I lost everything that night. My power, my money, my freedom, everything I thought defined me, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it freed you to become who you really were. Because it gave me you. It gave me purpose. It gave me this, he gestured, around the community center. A way to actually help people instead of exploiting them. I had everything and I had nothing. Now I have almost nothing and I have everything that matters. Marie kissed him, there in his cluttered office surrounded by budgets and grant applications and photos of kids they'd helped. Sometimes, she said, we need to lose everything to find what we're really looking for. Sometimes rock bottom is actually a foundation, something solid to build on instead of the shifting sand of power and money. You're very wise for a cleaning woman, Alessandro teased, and you're very humble for a former godfather. They laughed together, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and built something beautiful from the ruins. 20 years after that night in the penthouse, Alessandro Benedetti died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. He died in the same small Brooklyn apartment where he'd started his new life, with Marie holding his hand at his funeral. The church was packed, not with mobsters or criminals or powerful men, but with teenagers he'd mentored, mothers he'd helped, ex-cons he'd counseled, people whose lives he'd touched through 20 years of honest, humble service. Marie stood at his casket, looking at the man who'd become her husband, her partner, her proof that people can change. You did it, she whispered. You became the man you wanted to be. I'm so proud of you. One of the teenagers from the community center approached her after the service. Mrs. Benedetti, I just wanted to say, it changed my life. I was headed down a bad path, joining a gang, all of that. But he told me his story about having power and losing it, about prison and redemption. He said the only real power is the power to choose who you become. That stuck with me. I'm in college now, studying social work because of him. Marie hugged the young man. He'd be so happy to hear that. That's all he wanted, to help kids like you avoid his mistakes. Did you know him? Before prison, I mean, when he was a mob boss. No, I met him the night before he went to prison. He'd lost everything, and I cleaned his penthouse and made him an omelet and told him he still had choices. An omelet saved his life? Marie laughed through her tears. No, but showing up did. Treating him like a human being did. Believing he could change did. Sometimes that's all people need. Someone to show up. Someone to believe. That night, Marie sat in their apartment, surrounded by memories of the man Alessandro had become. Photos from their wedding, letters from kids he'd helped, the college degree he'd earned in prison, the award from the Brooklyn Community Foundation for his 20 years of service. She thought about that night 20 years ago when she'd opened the door of a stranger's penthouse and found a broken man contemplating suicide. She'd stayed to clean, but she'd also stayed because she couldn't walk away from someone in pain. She hadn't known she was saving his life. She'd just known he needed someone to see him, and in seeing him, in believing he could change, she'd changed her own life too. She'd found love she never expected, partnership she never imagined, proof that grace can transform even the most broken person. Alessandro had lost everything that night, his power, his empire, his freedom, his future, but losing everything had become his salvation, because when you have nothing, you're free to become anything, because sometimes rock bottom is just a foundation waiting for someone to build something real, because sometimes an Italian godfather and a Haitian cleaning woman meet in a penthouse on the worst night of both their lives and save each other, and because sometimes, just sometimes, the night you lose everything is actually the night your real life begins. The end. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe and share it. Drop a comment. Have you ever lost everything and found it was actually a gift? Have you been saved by someone who just showed up? What would you have done in Marie's position that night? This is a story about showing up when it matters, about redemption found in the darkest hours, about the power of one person who refuses to look away from someone else's pain. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.